The small town of Maplewood was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Life there moved at a gentle pace, with the biggest excitement often being the annual fall festival or a sudden snowstorm that canceled school. The streets were lined with charming houses, their porches decorated with pumpkins in October and twinkling lights in December. It was peaceful, predictable, and safe, or so it seemed. Officer Clara Hayes had been part of this community for over 10 years. She wasn't just a police officer. She was a familiar face, someone people trusted. Whether it was helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries or calming down a teenager caught spray painting a wall, Clara always approached her job with kindness and patience. Her uniform gave her authority, but it was her warm smile and steady presence that made her beloved by the townsfolk. On this particular morning, the air carried a crispness unique to autumn, and golden leaves swirled around as a soft breeze swept through the streets. Clara was on her usual patrol, driving slowly past quiet neighborhoods and waving at residents who greeted her from their yards. Everything felt normal, until something unusual caught her eye. A little boy came running toward her from across the street. At first glance, he looked like any other child you might see playing outside in Maplewood, but there was something different about him today. His face was pale, his eyes wide with panic, and his small legs pumped furiously as if he were fleeing danger itself. Clara immediately pulled her patrol car to the side of the road and stepped out, her instincts sharp despite the calm surroundings. The boy didn't stop until he reached her, nearly stumbling in his haste. He looked up at her, tears streaming down his cheeks, his chest heaving as he fought to catch his breath. For a moment, he simply stared at her, trembling. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke 5 words that froze Clara to her core. She said, "You'd know." Clara's heart skipped a beat. Who was she, and what did she mean? The boy's desperate tone sent chills racing down her spine. She knelt beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Hey, it's okay," she said softly, trying to mask the unease creeping into her own voice. "What's wrong? Who told you that?" But the boy didn't answer right away. Instead, he collapsed into sobs, clutching at her jacket as though afraid she might disappear. Clara's mind raced. Something about his appearance, the fear in his eyes, the urgency in his steps, told her this wasn't just a random encounter. This was important. This mattered. As she tried to comfort the boy, one thought kept nagging at her. Why did he come to me? Out of all the people in Maplewood, why had he sought her out specifically? What did those 5 words mean? And more importantly, who was she? Clara glanced around, half expecting to see someone watching them, but the street remained eerily empty. The boy's distress was real, and whatever had driven him to find her clearly wasn't trivial. Something big was unfolding, and Clara couldn't shake the feeling that her life and perhaps the lives of others was about to change forever. The boy's sobs echoed in the quiet street, each one tugging at Clara's heart. She knelt beside him, her mind racing as she tried to piece together what was happening. His words, those 5 haunting words, kept replaying in her head. She said you'd know. But who was she? And what exactly was Clara supposed to know? The boy's fear was palpable, and it infected her too, spreading unease through every fiber of her being. Clara took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm for his sake. "Hey," she said gently, brushing tears from his cheeks with her thumb. "It's okay, you're safe now. Can you tell me your name?" The boy sniffled, looking up at her with wide, tear-filled eyes. After a moment, he whispered, "Ethan." "Okay, Ethan," Clara said, nodding encouragingly. "That's a good start. Now can you tell me who she is? Who told you to come find me?" Ethan hesitated, his lower lip trembling. He seemed torn between wanting to speak and being afraid of what might happen if he did. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he murmured, "My mom." Clara's stomach tightened. Ethan's mother? That didn't make sense. Why would his mom send him running to a police officer in such a state? Unless something was terribly wrong. "What about your mom, Ethan?" Clara pressed gently, trying not to overwhelm him. "Is she okay?" Where is she? She's... Ethan started, then stopped, shaking his head. I don't know. She just told me to run, to find you, and said you'd understand. Clara frowned. There was something familiar about this situation, something nagging at the edges of her memory. But before she could dig deeper, Ethan added in a shaky voice, She said bad people are coming. The blood drained from Clara's face. Bad people? Coming for Ethan, for his mom? What on earth had they gotten themselves into? Her instincts screamed that this wasn't some ordinary domestic issue. It was bigger, darker, more dangerous. And yet, there was still that lingering question. Why her? Why would Ethan's mom think Clara would understand? Ethan, Clara said slowly, choosing her words carefully. Does your mom have a name? Do I know her? Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. Her name is Sarah. The world seemed to tilt beneath Clara's feet. Sarah. The name hit her like a punch to the gut. Memories surged forward, unbidden and unwelcome. Memories of laughter, arguments, betrayal, and finally silence. Sarah Hayes. Her little sister. The same sister she hadn't spoken to in over 15 years. The same sister whose disappearance from her life had left a gaping wound that never fully healed. For a moment, Clara couldn't breathe. How could this be happening? Was this some kind of cruel coincidence? Or was fate forcing her to confront the ghosts of her past? She looked down at Ethan, noticing the resemblance now. The same freckles, the same curly hair. This was Sarah's son, her nephew, and Sarah had sent him to her for help. Where is she, Ethan? Clara asked, her voice firmer now, tinged with urgency. Where's your mom? Ethan wiped his nose with the back of his hand and pointed toward the edge of Tennis at the cabin, he said, our old cabin in the woods. Clara's chest tightened. The family cabin. It had been years since anyone in her family set foot there. Her parents had bought it decades ago as a retreat, but after their deaths, it became a place filled with memories too painful to revisit. If Sarah was there now, it meant something serious was going on, something desperate. Clara stood up, pulling Ethan along with her. Come on, she said, guiding him toward her patrol car. We need to go find her. As she buckled Ethan into the passenger seat, her mind raced. Who were these bad people Sarah had mentioned? What trouble had she gotten herself into? And why, after all these years, had she reached out to Clara now? One thing was certain. Whatever awaited them at the cabin, it was going to change everything. The drive to the cabin was anything but quiet. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, his small hands gripping the edge of the seat tightly, his eyes darting nervously out the window as though expecting someone or something to appear at any moment. Clara tried to keep her focus on the road, but her mind was a storm of questions and emotions. The closer they got to the cabin, the heavier the weight on her chest became. Ethan, Clara said softly, glancing at him briefly before returning, her gaze to the winding road ahead. Can you tell me more about what happened? Why did your mom send you to find me? Ethan hesitated, chewing on his lip. For a moment, Clara thought he might not answer, but then he began speaking in a voice so quiet she had to strain to hear him. Mom's been acting weird for weeks, he said. She wouldn't let me go outside much and she kept talking, on the phone late at night. I didn't understand most of it, but she sounded scared. Clara's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Scared of what? I don't know, Ethan admitted, shaking his head. But last night, some men came to our house. They knocked really loud and Mom told me to hide in my room. I heard them yelling and then she started crying. His voice cracked and he wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. This morning she woke me up early and said we had to leave. She took me to the cabin, but when we got there, she locked herself in one of the rooms. She kept saying things, like I messed up and they're going to hurt us. Clara's stomach churned. Whoever these men were, they clearly posed a serious threat. Not just to Sarah, but to Ethan too. And now Sarah had sent her son running straight to Clara, trusting that she'd protect him. It was both touching and terrifying. Clara couldn't help but wonder how deep Sarah's troubles ran, and whether she'd be able to fix whatever mess her sister had gotten herself into. What else did she say, Ethan? Clara asked, her voice steady despite the unease bubbling inside her. Did she mention anyone by name, or give you any clues about who these men are? Ethan shook his head again. No, but she kept saying stuff about money and mistakes. And she told me... He paused, his brow furrowing as if trying to remember exactly what his mother had said. She told me to tell you that she's sorry, that she never wanted this to happen. Clara's heart sank. Those words, she's sorry, cut deeper than she cared to admit. Whatever had driven Sarah away all those years ago, whatever bitterness had torn their family apart, it seemed her sister still carried the guilt of it. But apologies weren't enough right now, not when lives were potentially at stake. As they turned onto the narrow dirt path leading to the cabin, Clara slowed the car, scanning the dense forest around them. The trees loomed overhead, their branches casting long shadows across the road. The cabin itself wasn't visible yet, but Clara could already feel the tension thickening in the air. Something about this place felt wrong, off-kilter, as though danger lurked just beyond sight. Ethan, Clara said, pulling the car to a stop near the edge of the clearing. Stay here. Lock the doors and don't come out unless I say so, okay? No matter what happens. Ethan nodded quickly, his face pale but determined. Okay, he whispered. Be careful. Clara offered him a reassuring smile before stepping out of the car. Her hand instinctively went to the holster on her hip, ensuring her weapon was secure. As she approached the cabin, memories flooded. Back, lazy summer afternoons spent fishing at the nearby stream, laughter echoing through the woods during family hikes. This place used to symbolize happiness and togetherness. Now it felt like a trap waiting to snap shut. The front door of the cabin hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. Clara pushed it open cautiously, her senses on high alert. Inside, the air was stale, carrying the faint scent of damp wood and neglect. The furniture was covered in dust and papers were scattered across the floor as though someone had rifled through them in a hurry. And then she saw it, a note lying on the kitchen counter, written in handwriting she recognized instantly. Sarah's handwriting. Clara's breath hitched as she picked it up, her eyes scanning the words scrawled hastily across the page. Clara, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Please forgive me. Protect Ethan. They're coming. Before Clara could process the full weight of the message, a faint sound reached her ears. A muffled cry coming from upstairs. Her pulse quickened. Someone was still here. The sound came again, a faint, desperate cry that seemed to echo through the silent cabin. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she gripped the railing of the staircase and began to climb, each step creaking under her weight. The noise was unmistakable now. Someone was upstairs and they were in trouble. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was it Sarah? Had she been hurt? Or worse? Was she being held against her will? Clara moved cautiously, her training kicking in, despite the storm of emotion swirling inside her. Every instinct told her to hurry, but she forced herself to stay alert, scanning the dimly lit hallway for any sign of movement or danger. The air grew colder the higher she went, carrying with it an eerie stillness that made her skin prickle. She could feel the weight of the gun at her side, a reminder of the potential threat lurking just out of sight. At the end of the hall, one door stood slightly ajar, light spilling through the crack. The cries were coming from within. Clara paused outside, listening intently. There was no mistaking it. It was Sarah's voice, trembling and broken. Taking a deep breath, Clara pushed the door open slowly, her eyes adjusting to the scene before her. Sarah sat on the floor, huddled in a corner, clutching a small duffel bag tightly to her chest. Her once vibrant appearance was gone. Her hair was disheveled, her face pale and streaked with tears. For a moment, Clara barely recognized her own sister. This wasn't the confident, fiery Sarah she remembered. The woman who had always been so sure of herself even when life got tough. This was someone else entirely, fragile, terrified, and utterly defeated. Sarah, Clara whispered, stepping into the room. Her voice cracked with emotion, a mixture of relief and disbelief washing over her. What's going on? Who are you running from? Sarah's head snapped up, her wide eyes locking onto Clara's. For a split second, she looked like she might bolt, but then recognition dawned, and she sagged in defeat. "Clara," she breathed, her voice raw with exhaustion. "You came." "Of course I came," Clara said firmly, closing the distance between them. She knelt beside her sister, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Ethan found me. He's safe. He's waiting downstairs. But you need to tell me what's happening. Right now." Sarah shook her head, fresh tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want to drag you into this," she choked out. "I thought I could handle it alone. I thought I could fix everything without anyone getting hurt. But I was wrong. So wrong." Clara's stomach churned. Whatever mess Sarah was in, it was bad. Worse than she'd imagined. "Start talking," she urged, her tone softening. "Who are these people? What do they want from you?" Sarah hesitated, clutching the duffel bag tighter. "It started months ago," she began haltingly. "I needed money. Just a little to get us by after I lost my job. Someone mentioned this guy, said he could help. It sounded harmless at first, just borrowing cash and paying it back later. But then things changed. He wanted more than money. He wanted favors. Things I couldn't give him." Clara's jaw tightened. "And now he's after you?" "Not just me," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He knows about Ethan. He said if I don't pay him back or do what he wants, he'll hurt him. That's why I brought him here, to the cabin. I thought we'd be safe, but..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "They followed us. They know where we are." Clara's blood ran cold. These weren't just creditors looking for repayment. They were predators, willing to use fear and violence to get what they wanted. And now, thanks to Sarah's desperation, both she and Ethan were in grave danger. "How much time do we have?" Clara asked sharply, already calculating their next move. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her voice breaking. "Maybe hours. Maybe less." Clara stood abruptly, her mind racing. They couldn't stay here. It was too isolated, too easy for their pursuers to trap them. But leaving meant risking exposure, especially if whoever was after them was already watching the cabin. Either way, staying put wasn't an option. "We're leaving," Clara declared, pulling Sarah to her feet. "Right now. Grab whatever you absolutely need and let's go." "But Ethan," Sarah protested weakly. "He's safe for now," Clara interrupted, her voice firm. "But we can't protect him if we're caught here. We'll figure this out, Sarah, together, but you have to trust me." For the first time since Clara arrived, Sarah nodded, a flicker of hope lighting her eyes. As they hurried toward the stairs, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time, and that the worst was yet to come. Clara led Sarah down the creaking staircase, their footsteps muffled by the urgency of the moment. The duffel bag Sarah carried thudded softly against her side with each step, its contents unknown, but clearly important enough for her to risk everything to keep it safe. Clara's mind raced as they descended, her eyes darting toward every shadow and corner of the cabin. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking their every move. When, they reached the bottom floor, Clara signaled for Sarah to wait while she checked outside through the window. The clearing around the cabin was eerily quiet, the golden hues of late afternoon casting long shadows across the overgrown grass. At first glance, there was no sign of movement, no cars, no figures lurking among the trees. But Clara knew better than to trust appearances. These men weren't amateurs. If they were close, they'd be hiding, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Stay here," Clara whispered to Sarah before moving quickly to unlock the front door. She cracked it open just enough to peek out, scanning the tree line one more time. Still nothing. For now, they had a small window of opportunity, but how long would it last? She motioned for Sarah to follow her, and together they slipped outside, sticking close to the cabin's walls as they made their way back to the patrol car. Ethan was still inside, his face pressed anxiously against the passenger window when he spotted them. Relief washed over his features as Clara opened the door, but it quickly turned to confusion when he saw his mother. "Mom," he exclaimed, reaching for her. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," Sarah said, forcing a smile despite the fear etched into her face. She hugged him tightly, her arms wrapping around him like she never wanted to let go. "We're going to get out of here, okay? Everything's going to be all right." Clara didn't share Sarah's optimism. As much as she wanted to believe they could escape cleanly, she knew the odds were stacked against them. They needed a plan, and fast. But before she could think further, a distant rumble broke the silence. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but grew louder with each passing second. "Car engines." "They're here," Clara muttered under her breath, her pulse spiking. She glanced toward the edge of the clearing, where two black SUVs emerged from the trees, kicking up clouds of dust as they sped toward the cabin. There was no mistaking their intent. They weren't here to negotiate or ask questions. They were here to take what they wanted by force. "Get in the car," Clara barked, shoving Sarah and Ethan toward the back seat. She slid behind the wheel, slamming the door shut just as the SUVs screeched to a halt in front of the cabin. Men poured out, their faces obscured by masks, their movements swift and calculated. One of them shouted something unintelligible, gesturing wildly toward the patrol car. Clara didn't wait to hear more. The engine roared to life as she slammed her foot on the gas pedal, tires spinning briefly before catching traction. The car shot forward, barreling down the narrow dirt path that led away from the cabin. Behind them, the men scrambled into their vehicles, giving chase almost immediately. Clara gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white as she navigated the winding trail at breakneck speed. "Hold on!" she yelled over her shoulder, glancing briefly at Sarah and Ethan in the rearview mirror. Both were clutching each other, their faces pale with terror. Clara hated putting them through this, but staying put would have been suicide. At least in motion, they had a fighting chance. The forest blurred past as the car bounced violently. Over roots and rocks, the pursuing SUVs gaining ground with alarming speed. Gunfire erupted suddenly, the sharp cracks echoing through the trees as bullets whizzed past the patrol car. Clara swerved instinctively, narrowly avoiding a direct hit to the windshield. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to panic. Not now. Not when so much depended on her keeping them alive. "We need to lose them," Sarah cried from the back seat, her voice trembling. "They'll catch us." Clara gritted her teeth, her mind working furiously. The main road was still miles away, and there was no guarantee they could reach it before the SUVs closed the gap. They needed another option, something unexpected. And then she saw it. A narrow deer trail branching off to the left, barely visible beneath the dense foliage. It was risky. The path looked barely wide enough for the car, but it might buy them precious time. Without hesitation, Clara jerked the wheel hard to the left, sending the car hurtling down the makeshift trail. Branches scraped against the sides of the vehicle, leaves smacking against the windshield as they plunged deeper into the woods. The SUVs hesitated at the entrance to the trail, their drivers unwilling to risk following on such uncertain terrain. For now, they'd bought themselves a reprieve, but Clara knew it wouldn't last forever. As the sounds of pursuit faded into the distance, Clara allowed herself a brief moment of relief. They weren't safe yet, not by a long shot, but they were still alive. And as long as she had breath in her body, she wasn't going to let anyone harm Sarah or Ethan. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The narrow deer trail twisted and turned unpredictably, forcing Clara to slow the car slightly as branches clawed at the windshield and roots threatened to send them careening into a tree. The chaos outside was matched only by the turmoil brewing inside the car. Ethan clung to his mother, his small hands gripping her jacket like a lifeline, while Sarah stared out the window, her face pale and drawn. Guilt weighed heavily on her shoulders, and it showed in the way she avoided meeting Clara's eyes in the rearview mirror. Clara didn't have time to dwell on the tension between them. Her focus was razor-sharp, every sense attuned to their surroundings. The SUVs may have fallen behind for now, but they wouldn't give up that easily. These men, were relentless. She'd seen it in the cold efficiency of their movements, heard it in the sharp cracks of gunfire aimed at her car. They weren't just after money anymore, this had become personal, and if they caught up there would be no mercy. "We need to keep moving," Clara said firmly, breaking the tense silence. "This trail won't lead us far, and we can't stay hidden forever." Sarah nodded weakly, clutching the duffel bag tighter to her chest. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To safety," Clara replied without hesitation. "There's an old ranger station about 5 miles from here. It's abandoned, but it'll give us shelter until I figure out our next move. We'll call for backup once we're sure we've lost them." Ethan looked up at his aunt with wide, trusting eyes. "You're not going to let them get us, right?" Clara met his gaze in the rearview mirror, offering him a reassuring smile despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Not a chance, kiddo. I promise." The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Promises were easy to make but harder to keep when lives hung in the balance. Still, she couldn't afford to let doubt creep in. Not now. Not when so much depended on her staying strong. After what felt like an eternity, the deer trail opened up into a clearing where the ranger station stood, a dilapidated wooden structure, surrounded by overgrown bushes and leaning fence posts. Clara pulled the car around to the back, parking it out of sight from any potential pursuers. She killed the engine and stepped out cautiously, scanning the area for signs of danger before signaling for Sarah and Ethan to follow. Inside, the air smelled musty, and dust coated every surface. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like ghostly curtains, and broken furniture littered the corners. It wasn't much, but it would do for now. "Stay low and quiet," Clara instructed as she locked the door behind them. "If they find us, don't make a sound unless I tell you to." Sarah nodded, pulling Ethan close as they huddled together in the corner. Clara moved to the windows, peering through gaps in the boards nailed across them. So far, the forest remained, eerily silent. But silence could be deceiving. Minutes stretched into hours, each one heavier than the last. Just as Clara began to hope they might have truly lost their pursuers, the distant rumble of engines shattered the quiet. The SUVs were back and they were closing in fast. "They found us," Sarah whispered, panic rising in her voice. "What do we do now?" Clara's mind raced. There was no escape this time. The ranger station offered no other exits, and running into the woods would leave them exposed. But surrender wasn't an option either. Not when these men had already proven how far they were willing to go. "I'm getting you two out of here," Clara said finally, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Listen carefully. When I say run, you grab Ethan and head straight for the trees. Don't look back, no matter what happens. Do you understand?" Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she realized what Clara was planning. "No," she choked out, shaking her head. "I won't let you." "You don't have a choice," Clara interrupted, her voice soft but firm. "Ethan needs you. He needs someone to protect him. That's your job now, not mine." Before Sarah could protest further, the sound of boots, crunching against gravel, reached their ears. The men were almost upon them. Clara gave Sarah one final meaningful look before turning toward the door, her hand resting on the grip of her weapon. "Go," she whispered, her voice steadied despite the storm raging inside her. "Now." As Sarah and Ethan slipped away, the wooden floorboards creaked beneath Clara's boots as she moved toward the front door, her heart pounding like a drum. Outside, the crunch of boots against gravel grew louder, accompanied by muffled voices exchanging sharp commands. She knew they were close. Too close. Every second counted now. Clara tightened her grip on her weapon, her mind racing through scenarios. There were at least 4 or 5 men out there, maybe more. Outnumbered and cornered, she had no illusions about her chances in a direct confrontation. But that wasn't her goal. Her only mission was to buy Sarah and Ethan enough time to escape into the dense forest behind the ranger station. If she could hold them off, even for just a few minutes, it might be enough. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. Then, with deliberate slowness, she eased the door open, just wide enough to step halfway out onto the porch. The sight before her made her blood run cold. 3 masked men stood in the clearing, their weapons drawn, scanning the area methodically. One of them spotted her immediately, shouting something unintelligible as he raised his gun. "Stop right there," Clara barked, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. She held her own weapon steady, aiming directly at the leader. "You don't want to do this." For a moment, no one moved. The standoff hung heavy in the air, broken only by the rustling leaves overhead and the faint chirping of birds oblivious to the danger below. Then the leader smirked beneath his mask, lowering his weapon slightly but not enough to signal surrender. "You're outnumbered, officer," he said, his tone mocking. "Put the gun down, and we'll make this quick." Clara didn't flinch. "I'm not letting you near my family," she replied, her voice unwavering. "If you take one more step, I won't hesitate to shoot." The man chuckled darkly, glancing back at his companions. "Feisty," he muttered, "but brave doesn't mean smart." He gestured to the others, who began spreading out slowly, attempting to flank her. Clara adjusted her stance, keeping her aim trained on the leader while tracking the others' movements in her peripheral vision. Time seemed to slow as the seconds ticked by. Clara knew she couldn't keep this up forever. They were testing her, probing for weaknesses, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and when they did, she wouldn't stand a chance. But she also knew that every second she delayed gave Sarah and Ethan a better chance to disappear into the woods unnoticed. Suddenly, the sound of snapping twigs echoed from behind the cabin. Someone else had arrived. A 4th man, emerging from the tree line where Sarah and Ethan should have fled. Clara's stomach dropped. Had they been caught? Were they still close enough to be seen? Her distraction cost her. In that split second of hesitation, the leader lunged forward, firing a shot that grazed Clara's shoulder. Pain seared through her arm, but she gritted her teeth and returned fire, hitting him squarely in the leg. He went down with a grunt, clutching his wound as his comrades dove for cover. Chaos erupted. Gunshots rang out, splintering the wooden railing beside Clara and sending shards flying. She ducked low, using the porch as cover while returning fire sparingly, conserving her ammunition. Each shot was calculated, aimed not to kill but to disable, to create confusion and buy precious moments. "Run, Sarah," Clara shouted into the void, hoping her sister could hear her. "Please, just keep running." Behind her, the ranger station groaned under the barrage of bullets. A stray round shattered a window, showering the interior with glass. Clara risked a glance over her shoulder, praying she hadn't led the men straight to Sarah and Ethan. To her relief, the forest remained eerily silent. Whether it meant they'd escaped or simply hidden deeper, she couldn't tell, but she had to believe they were safe. As the gunfire intensified, Clara realized she couldn't hold out much longer. Blood trickled down her arm, warm and sticky, making her grip slippery. Still, she refused to give up. Not yet. Not until she was absolutely sure Sarah and Ethan were far away. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the shooting stopped. The clearing fell eerily quiet, save for the ragged breathing of the injured leader and the distant echo of footsteps fading into the woods. Clara peeked cautiously around the edge of the porch, her heart hammering. The men were retreating, not because they'd given up, but because they'd found what they were looking for. 2 figures struggled in the distance, dragged roughly toward one of the SUVs. Sarah and Ethan. "No," Clara screamed, bolting forward despite the pain in her shoulder. But it was too late. The vehicles roared to life, kicking up clouds of dust as they sped away, leaving Clara alone in the clearing. Kneeling amidst the wreckage, Clara let the weight of her failure crash over her. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered a single broken promise. "I'll find you, I swear it." The clearing felt colder now, the silence pressing down on Clara like a weight she couldn't shake. Her injured shoulder throbbed with every movement, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. Sarah and Ethan were gone, taken by men who had no mercy, no limits. The thought of them scared, alone, and at the mercy of those monsters made her sick to her stomach. But Clara knew one thing for certain: giving up wasn't an option. Not now, not ever. She forced herself to stand, gritting her teeth against the sharp sting in her arm as she surveyed the scene. The ranger station was a mess: broken windows, splintered wood, and spent bullet casings scattered across the ground. It was evidence of what had happened here, but it wasn't enough to lead her directly to Sarah and Ethan. She needed more. Something tangible. A clue. Anything. Clara retraced her steps, searching for anything the men might have left behind. In their haste, they hadn't been careful. Near the edge of the clearing, she spotted something glinting in the dirt. A small piece of metal. Kneeling down, she picked it up and turned it over in her hand. It was a badge, tarnished but unmistakable, the insignia of a private security firm known for its ties to organized crime. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was bigger than she'd imagined. Her mind raced as she pieced together what little she knew. Whoever these men worked for, they weren't amateurs. They operated with precision, resources, and connections that reached far beyond Maplewood. If Clara was going to save Sarah and Ethan, she'd need help, and fast. Pulling out her radio, Clara called for backup, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Dispatch, this is Officer Hayes. I need immediate assistance at coordinates." She rattled off the location of the ranger station before adding, "And patch me through to Detective Ramirez. Tell him it's urgent." Within minutes, reinforcements arrived, along with Detective Ramirez, a seasoned investigator who had worked with Clara on several high-profile cases. His sharp eyes scanned the area before landing on Clara, taking in her bloodied uniform and grim expression. "What happened here?" he asked, his tone serious but tinged with concern. Clara filled him in quickly, showing him the badge and explaining everything she'd learned since Ethan first ran to her that morning. By the time she finished, Ramirez was nodding thoughtfully. "This isn't local," he said finally. "These guys are pros. We'll need to involve state authorities and maybe even federal agencies if we're going to track them down." Clara nodded, determination burning in her eyes. "Do whatever it takes. Just find them." Over the next few days, Clara threw herself into the investigation, working tirelessly alongside Ramirez and his team. They traced the security firm's operations, uncovering links to illegal activities ranging from loan sharking to human trafficking. It was a web of corruption so vast and intricate that it seemed impossible to untangle. But Clara refused to let doubt creep in. Every lead mattered. Every detail brought her closer to Sarah and Ethan. Finally, after weeks of relentless pursuit, a breakthrough came. An anonymous tip led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Clara didn't wait for backup this time. With Ramirez and a SWAT team flanking her, she stormed the building, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Inside, they found Sarah and Ethan huddled together in a dimly lit corner, bruised but alive. When Ethan saw Clara, he broke free from Sarah's arms and ran to her, throwing himself into her embrace. Tears streamed down Clara's face as she held him tightly, whispering promises she intended to keep. Sarah approached slowly, her face pale but filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for everything." Clara shook her head, pulling her sister into a tight hug. "We'll talk later. Right now, let's just get you both home." In the months that followed, life began to heal. Clara adopted Ethan legally, determined to give him the stable life he deserved. Sarah sought counseling, working to rebuild the trust she'd broken years ago. And though the scars of that day would always remain, they became a reminder of resilience, love, and the unbreakable bonds of family. For Clara, it was proof that no matter how dark things got, there was always light waiting on the other side, if you were willing to fight for it.